Hi, my name is Travis, and today I'm going to show you how to make a proper network cable. There's a few things that we're going to need for this. Obviously, we are going to need some network cable. In this case, I am using a section of Cat 5e cable, and you'll notice that this cable is just a little bit thinner. And that's because this is riser cable. This is not plenum cable, so this is PVC coated, and this is not designed to go into plenum spaces or in walls. This is for just making regular network patch cables. We're going to need two RJ45 ends and some cable crimps. These you can get off of Amazon fairly cheaply. Same thing with RJ45 jacks, or you can even go to Home Depot or Lowe's to get them. And same thing with the network cable. You can pick up a box of 1,000 feet for about $145, so it's not exactly cheap if you're looking to just make a few cables. But if you're planning on running some through your house or something, it's a great place to get some cable. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about wiring. So we really have two standards when it comes to network cable wiring. We have the get my tool out here. So we have T568A and we have T568B. And these two are the only standards out there. And we commonly use B for straight through cables. So straight through cable is where pins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all line up on both ends of the cable. What we also do is we create a crossover cable, which is used when we have two devices that need to talk to each other, but they are the same device. So computer to computer, router to router, router to computer. We need to have a crossover cable. And all that does, and if you look at A and B, we're going to look at pins 3 and 6. And what we're doing when we create a crossover cable is one end is going to be the B standard and the other end is going to be the A standard. And that's because we're just swapping or crossing the transmit and receive pins. So pins 1 and 2 are transmit, I believe, and 3 and 6 are the receive. I might have those flipped. But that way everything works appropriately. Now today, most equipment can detect what kind of cable you use. So this really applies to old equipment, but for the Network Plus and the CCNA exam, they do want you to know that even though modern equipment is going to automatically sense and detect what's where, you still have to know the difference between a crossover and a straight through and how to make it. And while we're talking about that, I actually have another cable that you might commonly hear, and it's called a rollover cable. And a rollover cable is a console cable. Now you can use standard Ethernet to build a rollover cable, but in most cases you're going to see on one end of the rollover cable it has an RJ45, and the only thing different are the colors. Like this is a complete rainbow, so we got black, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and looks like gray. And that goes into a serial connector, and I have a USB adapter on the end of this one because I do not have a USB or I don't have a serial port on my laptop. So when I'm out in the field and I need to console into a Cisco device, I need to have this guy to connect to the console port. There are very few cases where there might be a RJ45 that you can use on both ends, but generally they also make adapters where you can take a self-made rollover cable, plug it into a serial, and then from that serial adapter you can turn it into USB. And then the only difference with a rollover cable, and the reason why it's a rollover cable, is one end you do the beast wiring, and then you just roll it over. So pin 1 would be brown, and then white, brown, and so on. So that's really the only difference. So I'm going to show you how to make the perfect Ethernet cable on the first try. Keep in mind, I have been doing this for many years, so I've gotten a technique that's really good and it just works. And I'm going to show you my technique, and I'm going to go really nice and slow and show you how to create a perfect quality Ethernet cable every time. So first things first, we need our crimps, and I like these crimps because they do everything. So on the back side here, if you can see that, it actually cuts the cable, so that will cut. On this side, we have a strip function, and then over here we have RJ11 and RJ45, so I could actually make telephone cable with this if I needed to. Invest in a good set of crimps. I've seen a lot of videos where people are like, oh, I have my crimps, I have a wire stripper, and then I have a wire cutter. You don't need 3 tools for the job if you invest in a good crimp that has all 3 tools built in. So let's get started here. I've already cut the cable from my box, and you'll notice that this end is kind of jagged and just looks awful, and that's okay because I'm going to show you how to fix that. So I have a fairly decent size. This is about a 7-foot cable, which is perfect. I can always use a 7-foot cable. I'm going to start with the bad end first because this is the one where I see most people struggle. And when I say make a perfect cable, I mean when we put the RJ45 on, it's going to look like a store-bought cable. So get your crimps. I have a thing where I like to play with them, make sure it's all loose, and get where we need to. And I'm going to go to my cutting edge. I'm going to stick in the cable so it pops out on the other side. You can see it's kind of sticking out right there. And we're just going to cut. And see how clean that is? It's a clean cut. This end, it's trash. So now we're going to flip over to our stripper side, and I'll lock this in place so I can show you. This channel right here is the stripping side because we have our razor blade right there, and then this end holds the cable. You don't want to push it down all the way when you have the cable in there because you can end up cutting the cable. So this is where you have to know the type of cable you're working with. I've been doing this for so long, so I know how to get the grip just right for plenum cable versus riser cable. Riser cable is a little bit thinner, so let's do this. And I like to minimize waste. So like when I say I'm making a 7-foot cable, it's going to be pretty darn close to 7 foot. So I stick it in, and just like when I was cutting the cable, there's only a little bit sticking out on the edge here. And I'm going to bring down the blade and watch it. And with this one, because this cable is thin enough, I can actually close the crimps all the way. And I'm just going to watch and carefully go around the cable. And I'm going to score the outer PVC. And with that, we just pull that off. And there's our twisted pairs. And you'll notice I only have about just under an inch to work with, which is more than enough for me. If you're not comfortable, obviously take a little bit more off and find your comfort zone. So I like to roll the cable so I get the string side, this string that they put in here. This just helps you pull the PVC. If you have good snips, you can snip it off. I just leave it on there because it doesn't bother me, because I don't really pull too much of it off, so it ends up not looking too bad. So we're going to go ahead and separate our pairs, and you'll notice that we have orange and white orange, blue and white blue, green and white green, and brown and white brown. And depending on the cable manufacturer, I've seen it where the whites, like the striped, will be pretty much just white. You might have a little bit of orange or a little bit of blue on it, but the only thing that tells you that it is it's actually, you know, part of the orange pair is the fact that it's twisted up with the orange. So be careful with the cable you buy. It's mostly on cheaper cable, but if you invest in good cable, it's good. And then I'm just going to start untwisting the pairs. And I want to be careful that under the PVC here, I don't want to untwist it too much, because then we get crosstalk, and crosstalk is no bueno. It will drive you mad and you'll have a bad cable. So I'm going to put it in order where I have white, orange, orange, and I'm just following the wiring standard for 568B. And then I'm going to do green. So blue is just going to kind of hang out in the middle there. I'm going to undo this. Green's a little bit tricky because we're splitting the cable. So I have white green next to solid orange. And there's an easy way to remember which order the cables go in. You're always going to start with a white or a striped cable, and there's going to be a solid between every single one. And your last one is going to be brown and solid. So got the green, and this is where it gets a little tricky because we don't want to untwist it too much because of crosstalk. So we're going to work our blue in, and blue can also be tricky. So I'm going to get that in like that. And then the green wants to go right into place. And then brown is going to come across just like that. So this is what it should look like untwisted. So I have white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. And depending on the cable too, if you just yank this out, you'll actually end up pulling the cable through the other end. So it's something to watch out for, but you won't have to worry about that on the other end once we get this crimped. So I try to pinch the cable on the PVC as best as I can, and I kind of just work these cables back and forth. And and this is where you'll you'll see how the cables are twisted underneath the PVC, but it's nothing to worry about because we can fix it. So I'm just wiggling the ends back and forth to try and line them up and get them all straight. So, and remember, when you're doing this, just like the picture here, you want the clip on the top of the RJ45 to be facing away from you, and you want the gold plated pins to be facing you. So same thing with the cable. The end that's, when you put the connector on, you want to make sure that the clip is on the back. Otherwise, if you prefer to do it the other way, just remember you're starting with brown. But I wouldn't recommend that because that's going to screw you up when you have to know the correct order of the wires. So, all right, so we got them all. They're kind of moving, but that's okay. I'm going to go back to my cut side, and I'm going to kind of eyeball this. So you see how much cable I have sticking out? Probably right about, oh, getting caught. All right, so I have that much cable sticking out, and I'm going to cut. And this is where it gets messy. And once you cut, pinch, 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 pinch. So now I'm going to take my RJ45 and I'm going to slide it on. And there are channels inside of the connector that will help guide the wires in. So I just push it in, just like that, and I look. So the next thing we have to do, we have to look. So I'm gonna look and make sure I have OOG, BBG, BB, and that's how I remember it. And remember, we start with white and every other one is solid. So I take a quick second to look. White, orange, orange. White, green, blue. White, blue, green. White, brown, brown. And then another helpful tip that you can do to make sure that all the cables are at the front and they're going to get crimped properly is just look at the sides. Make sure that the brown cable is touching the end of the connector. Same thing with the orange. Make sure that the orange is touching the end of the connector. And you can see where the pin is going to pierce the wire. So if you just look, and it's good. We take our crimps and we slide it into the RJ45. And remember, gotta hold it in there. Once you start crimping, you can let go of the cable because some crimps require two hands. Some connectors are really, really bad and they do require a lot of strength. So I do one, hold it, and I'm using a lot of force on it. 2 and 3. And then we pull it out, do a quick little check. I can see that the cables have been pierced, and look at that. The PVC is up to the proper level, and it looks just like a commercial made cable. The only difference is my cables usually have this stringy stuff just on the end. Doesn't really matter. So if we bring out the other end of the cable, we're going to do it again. So this time I'm going to show you how to make a crossover cable. So on this end, we are going to do the 568A standard. So just like the B side, all this is the same. I'm going to cut off. I'm going to put my cable through, wait for a little bit to pop out of the other side, and I'm going to get a nice straight cut. Look at that, nice and straight. And now I'm going to put the cable through to bring out the wires. Again, I'm not bringing much out. You don't need much. Hold it down, twist the cable, so that way the outer is scored and cut a little bit, so you can just pull it right off. And again, that goes in the trash. If you're not familiar with making cables, or you haven't really done it and you're still getting used to your crimps, check the cables. If you see anything shiny down where you cut, it's no good. Just cut the end off again and start over, because you'll introduce shorts and it's not fun. So okay, so here we go. And this time, because we're doing a crossover cable, I'm going to move the green over to pins 1 and 2. And remember, it's going to be white, green, solid green. And then in the case of green, if we were doing B, is orange. So we're going to do, this one's going to be a little tricky. We're going to do white, orange. Then it's the same as before, blue and white, blue. And another thing to mention about cutting cable length, sometimes, you know, if you have bigger fingers, it might be difficult to work on smaller. So I have small hands, so it's easy for me to work with a very little cable. And orange is going to be a little stickler, but that's all right, we'll fix it. And then white, brown, brown. So if you look from left to right, I'll flip it so that way it's correct for you. This is the end of a crossover cable. So just like a straight through, we're only flipping 2 pairs. And now we'll bring them all together. So that way I can put an RJ45 connector on. Okay, just about there. Do it one good little wiggle, and we're ready to cut. So again, take my crimps. I'm going to kind of hold the cable so that way the order doesn't get messed up. I'm going to stick it in. Going to look at my crimps. Look at how much cable's sticking out on the other side, and I'm going to eyeball it because I've been doing this for a while. So right about there. And cut. So now I have all these little cut wires on my desk, but that's okay. So there we go. We're ready to put an RJ45 on it. Remember, tab goes in the back. The front, the flat end with the gold-plated pins faces you. And if you did it right, it should just slide on. And it might look a little crooked, but that's okay. It's a cable. It's made to move a little bit, so we could just center it. And again, I look at the sides, make sure that my cables are going to get pierced by those pins. I check the order, and I just glance and look at the solids because it's easier to see. So I have white, solid, white, solid, white, solid, white, solid. So orange is split, which is what we want. Take my RJ45 crimp. We're just going to stick it in there. Crimp it 3 times. Again, my preference. That way everything's good. And I verify. I look at the sides. Yep, pierced, pierced. So we have a 7-foot crossover cable, guaranteed to work, and it's professional quality every single time. So all I can recommend to you is go on Amazon, find a good length of cable. You can even buy cabling kits that include RJ45s. They include a few feet of cable, and just practice making cables. Again, you can get RJ45s really cheap off of Amazon as well. You can also get them at most major hardware stores. I get mine from Home Depot and Lowe's, depending on what's in the area. And practice making cables. You'll get really good at that. I will say that as a network administrator, if that is your career path, you're not going to be making cables every single day. However, because nobody goes right from taking a Network Plus exam or CCNA exam and going right into becoming a network administrator, it's good to know how to make a cable. I still have to occasionally make cables as a network admin, and you need to know it for the test, and it's a useful skill to have just in case you ever need to either fix a cable or make a custom cable. So there we go. We have ourselves a crossover cable. One thing I will also mention, that if you are going to hold on to this and you make another cable a straight through cable, mark your crossover cable. Or get into the habit of always checking both ends of the pins. Just because if somebody plugs this in, if somebody took this cable here, didn't know it was a crossover, plugged it into a computer, and then plugged it into a switch, things wouldn't work right. So always mark your cables or use a different color. Usually I like to use red as crossover. Blue or gray or any other color will be straight through. So, all right, that's it. That's how to make a cable. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe for more networking videos. Thanks for watching.